good? Okay, so thank you folks for joining us. Calling this meeting to order here at 6:10 p.m. Thank you everybody for the little bit of patience here as we were just wrapping up our previous meeting and getting ready for this. First item on our agenda is roll call.
Okay, I'm going to do the roll call. If you could say yay or nay. Board President Sam Centellas.
Present.
Myself, Rosa Heaston, Board Secretary here. Ryan Mathis, Board Treasurer, not here. Steph Hall,
Here.
Jeff Ray. And he's on Zoom and he's present. Sonia Watkins.
Present.
And Leslie Wesley.
We can't hear her. I heard her a little bit. Yep. Yeah.
And she's on Zoom call, or Zoom. Dwayne Wilson.
Present.
And he's also on Zoom. Do I call the one step here? Karima Fowler. Not, she's absent. And Ashley Northern. Absent. And do we have a quorum? Yes.
Thank you, Rosa. So our first item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion on the agenda.
Ball, so moved.
Stephanie Ball moves to approve the agenda. Second, please. Second, thank you very much. Sonia. And all in favor, any kind of discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Okay, I heard aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, that motion passes unanimously. Next on our agenda, I will entertain a motion around our May 16th, 2023 board meeting minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes from May 16th.
Thank you. We have a first.
Second, Ball.
We have a second. Any discussion on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, I will move to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. All right, so board president report. And so I had a couple things. One, just congratulations to, we completed our year. And so really excited to have seen I love seeing all the posts and year-end things and all the different, as I was mentioned, like the kinder graduation photos and all those things are like my favorite things. So congratulations to all the students in their achievements this previous academic year. And so then just also, when we get the excitement around the year end, we also want to thank all the people that made this successful year happen. So I wanted to give, a thank you to all the teachers and administrative staff of the South Bend Empowerment Zone that helped make this year a success. All of our partners at SBCSC as well. And I also have to give a big thank you to the families that have been our partners in this work this year. So the other one, as an update on the MOU, previous at our meetings, we reported a timeline on MOU approval. So we've extended the conversation and discussion time. We've had some logistical challenges. And so I wanted to provide an update on the MOU discussion. And we've delayed that timeline for logistical reasons. So summer meeting schedule and timelines have had us pushing the vote to our August meeting. We've been working diligently with SBCSC on details for this, for the arrangements that help keep our children and their outcomes and their family needs first. We thank SBCSC for their partnership as we look to the future and moving the empowerment zone forward. So more coming on that, but we're expecting now a vote on the MOU extension at our August meeting. And that is it for the board president report. Okay, so next item on the agenda is our public comment policy. I think we have the proposed new policy going up on the screen. And what we will do is we will entertain, as we will with this new policy, we'll entertain some public comment related to the new public comment policy at this time. Give me 1 second. So I'll actually read our proposed new public comment policy. We will accept we will accept public comments based on this new policy, and then we will vote on this new policy. So at regular meetings, the board will hold a public comment period before each vote, except for the consent agenda item. So that's the agenda and the minutes. It is requested that the public focus comments on the topic of the vote. The board will also hold a public comment period on all other topics at the end of the meeting, so anything not on the agenda. Individuals must sign up online by 12 p.m. on the meeting date, or in person no later than 10 minutes after the call to order. And so that sheet has been out in the hallway. Individuals must make their comments in person at the board meeting. Individuals are invited to address the board for 3 minutes. Individuals may comment in the order of sign up per topic. Individuals may only speak once during a public comment period. Speakers shall properly identify themselves after they approach the podium by stating their name and address for the record. Personnel issues are not to be addressed during open sessions. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a person's statement if the statement becomes personally directed, abusive, or obscene. And so at this point, we'll entertain public comment regarding our new public comment policy. Seeing none, any discussion from our questions from our board?
I do have a question. I was curious as to what staff person is monitoring the email portion?
That would, sorry, that would be me, Julia Tao, as well as our assistant, Vivian Jimenez.
Okay, very good, thank you.
So there'll be two people. So for redundant, it'd be good if we two people monitoring it. So in case one misses. Good question.
I have a question also. So it says here, and it's hyperlinked on here. I'm not sure like where this is for the public to get it, but it says individuals must sign up online. Where do they go online to access the link to sign up?
Sure, so there will be a Google form for each meeting that will be advertised on our social media as well as available on the zone's website. So for each meeting, people can just click. It's a little form that asks for the same information as far as their name, what topic on the agenda they'd like to address, and so forth, so that we can be organized in hearing the different comments addressed.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, entertain a motion around the policy.
I make a motion to accept the public comment policy.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Leslie. We can't, for some reason, we can't hear you. Hold on real quick. Jeff and Leslie, for some reason, we can hear you, but very, very little.
Jeff is trying to talk. He's trying to speak. I don't think he can hear us.
So try again, Jeff. I think we had a volume issue for you, for our, just 1 second. Because we can hear you, but just very, very little.
Was that before my motion?
It was probably before your motion. So actually, we'll take the motion back.
Yeah.
And we'll still have our discussion portion here.
So I'm taking my motion back.
And then Jeff, if you want to try your comment again.
Yeah, sorry, Sam.
Well, hold on. We heard him for like a second, and then it goes away.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear everybody.
Jeff, can you maybe, email your question to one of us or somebody that's there?
Okay,
And generally,
there we go.
mine was more of a comment, that I'm on the governance committee that debated this. We wanted to make sure we encouraged public comment. We didn't have a great policy in place. and the desire was to put something clear in place to make sure that we encourage public comment had some guidelines. And so I'm just gonna reflect that on behalf of the governance committee.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. So then with that comment in, I will go back to entertaining a motion related to the policy.
I'll do it again. I make a motion to accept the public comment policy,
To approve it.
to approve it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second? All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Any additional discussion? Final comment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Abstentions? Hearing none, policy passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And we piloted our new policy and that worked well. All right, so next up on our agenda is the Finance Committee report. So May Finance report.
It's this
Okay, so we're skipping? Okay. All right, so we will change order and do Q4 survey data. We'll come back.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'd like to go over our Q4 survey results, the final results for the end of year in our surveys to various stakeholders, to students, staff, and our families. And I'd like to start with a few high-level takeaways as to the data and the results. In terms of the student surveys, we found some trends when we look at all of the zone information. Excuse me, for elementary schools, we found that students are feeling competent as leaders in their classrooms and their buildings and trusting adults to help them succeed. Whereas peer-to-peer relationships is an area that continues to need improvement. For middle school, peer-to-peer relationships were stronger, relatively speaking, and scored the highest, but trust in adults and pride in their school were scores that were lower and continued to be lower, so didn't have those increases at the end of the year. For our family surveys, family scores increased across almost all of our questions, 16 out of 17 questions, from Q1 to Q4. Communication was specifically something that improved the most. Communication with families from their perception and their survey completion. In terms of a highlight for a school, Warren had family scores that saw the greatest overall increase since Q1 to Q4. Warren continues to have the highest family scores across all of our schools, For staff survey, staff consistently reported high self-confidence and enjoyment of their work. These scores only increased throughout the year and align with some other pieces of information that we've gotten in terms of our staff. However, there are a couple of areas that continue to be issues and areas of focus for improvement. Low culture of accountability is something that we see as a trend in what they're reporting, and a school highlight. Coquillard staff saw the overall greatest increase looking at Q4 data and comparing it to Q1. Although it was below schools in terms of their level of performance, the increases were significant. We're going to go over a couple of conclusions, or actually hypotheses, and then we'll look at some of the data and then end with where we're going next. School level response to data. The communication to and from parents was identified as an area of focus at different schools. School level leaders, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those structures, but school level leaders planned around how to improve that, and Q4 survey data does reflect that parents noticed these improvements. The scores reflected that communication area going up, like mentioned in the previous slide. The structure for analysis and action planning was a quarterly data deep dive where principals were provided from the data team a structure to engage with their school leadership team at the results of their data, what areas were high scores, what areas were low scores, what might be some reasons behind that. And then principals came together with the data team facilitating a session that was more like a community of practice, where principals shared with each other what they had identified, what their plans were in terms of actions to take based on the information, and provided each other insights and maybe some thoughts as to other areas to focus on and actions to take. And that was done Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 after each set of results was in. The timing of the survey, one of the things that we looked at is even comparing to last year, our window for surveys was really close to the end of the year this time, literally the last 2 weeks of school. And we do feel that has impacted the information. I mean, just in terms of having context of how we want to look at all of the information and the validity of the results. Increased stress might be happening, behavior incidents, and we had low survey responses with families, with staff, and with students, lower than some other quarters. And we'll look at those in just a moment. We want to focus on progress, not perfection, and we know that changing culture and adult mindsets takes time. We also want to make sure that we are taking actions when we see data that really is indicative of a need for us to make a change or a movement. And as with communication, we'd like to see areas that are targeted, actions are taken, implemented, and then we see the results of how stakeholders are seeing that as well. An increased attention on teacher support. We do think that there's been, in terms of, we'll see some of the teacher items, but in terms of teachers feeling successful and aligned with their work, enjoying their work, we hope that some of the pieces that tie to that are changes that were made this year, early release professional learning opportunities, knowing that development and time for growth and reflection is important to our teachers, and the integration of data tools and looking at data to focus on the student gains that are made, the growth that is happening as we approach not only when we reach proficiency for students. An increased level of opportunities for student enrichment has also been part of this year, and we hypothesize has been reflected in some of the student data. Student services continuing to create and or expand programs across the year and across different schools in terms of athletics, Boys and Girls Club, Comic Book Literacy Club, and our Black History Month showcase a few months ago. When we look at student survey response rates, you can see some of our schools, in particular Q4, were really low. And what we can take from that information has its limitations because of the response rates and who we're measuring, right, or looking at in terms of perceptions, how many of our students. So it's not as robust as we would like, and like mentioned, Q4 surveys happening at the end of the school year is something we would definitely not want to do again. We'll talk a little bit more about that in our next steps. And we can see that Q1 and Q3 were highest in terms of overall response rates for students. We'll look at a few of the items, and here is opportunities to develop skills outside of the classroom. We mentioned some of the opportunities that Student Services has put forth and implemented this school year. Across our schools, we saw somewhat of an increase, but really a maintenance of Q1 to Q4, as well as across schools we saw the same pattern, which is another thing that happens with the surveys is that sometimes there's individual school stories that don't necessarily show up when we aggregate the data. And so it's important for schools to be able to look at that storyline individually as well. For elementary school, a high score item was adults at my school want me to be successful. We saw decreases in a couple of schools. We saw a maintenance of that score in 2 of our schools as well, from Q1 to Q4, and 83% of respondents overall agreeing. So a strong score in terms of the current levels and somewhat of an increase, maintenance in some of our schools. As you can see, the overall doesn't give you exactly what's happening with 2 schools and the other 2 schools, but our numbers in terms of 83% is a pretty good aggregate for the Q4 scores. Areas of improvement or for improvement. I enjoy my classmates as an item is something that improved somewhat at Coquillard, but in our other schools we saw some decreases and some that were significant. What is interesting is some of that, as schools take a look at what happens throughout the year, Q1 to Q2, Q2 to Q3, and Q3 to Q4, there might be some variability of what's happening. But by the end of the year, our numbers were 6 percentage points lower in I enjoy my classmates, with Q4 having limited response rates in some schools, as well as being at a time of year where kids and schools were about ready to close the year out. I feel safe from bullying and teasing at my school. Coquillard saw an increase of 7 percentage points from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and every other school saw a decrease. This is an area that continues to be an area of focus for all schools. Whether there was an increase, those numbers, those percentages need to obviously continue to be focused on. What is underlying this and what actions are showing the most improvement? That's where some of the principal conversations together can be helpful, because we can talk about the strategies that are working and how they're being implemented in certain schools, but an area of focus across the zone. For middle school, adults at my school treat me with respect, went up 5 points. The percentages, however, the current levels, are still not where they need to be. So there was some improvement from the beginning of the year to the end of the year there, but more work to be done. And a high score, I have at least one friend at school who I can confide in. Although that slipped somewhat in terms of percentages, 70% of students and 76% at the beginning of the year have somebody that they can confide in, a peer. Middle school and elementary school items and responses being distinctly different. For middle school areas of improvement, I am proud of my school. The actual level of Q4 as well as of Q1 highlights this is an area, a significant area of focus and of need of improvement. And I trust the adults in my school to help me solve problems. Went down from Q1 to Q4. Understanding why and what we're going to do about that will be important work for the middle school.
Question, so with Q4 survey results being such a low response rate, right? It's then hard to kind of gauge any outcome here because 90% of the students didn't respond. So I can see that this is all, either way, even the beginning scores weren't where we want them to be, but if they slip, we're not sure how accurate that is, an actual feeling of the overall student population.
Exactly, thank you. And especially Navarre being, I think, 9% for students. Like you said, 91% of students weren't in those data. Understanding what is going on there is important because of the current levels, even at the beginning of the year. I should say the levels of those percentages at the beginning of the year, but by all means, like mentioned earlier, these data, because of response rates, especially at 2 of the schools, don't give us all of the information. They give us a sliver of students, and we don't know if that is a group that represents the whole, or if it's a group that might be skewed on either side. So we definitely need to take caution.
Can I just make a quick question and comment? You might have explained this before when you do student surveys, but are we including kindergartners as well?
Thank you, that is a great question. Third through fifth,
Okay.
given the items, the understanding of the items, and then they are actually engaging in a self-assessment online. The students.
You say a self-assessment.
I'm sorry, the students themselves are individually engaging in the actual survey. They're completing the survey themselves on their Chromebook
During school hours?
during school hours.
So they have time where the teacher, I guess, in their classroom set the whole class down, and they take these assessments themselves?
Right, it's a few items, they might be 15 minutes that they're giving them, and they're working on that once each quarter is what we've done this past year. The past 2 years, I believe. Before then, I think they were collecting information much more frequently.
So you may be getting to this, but for these schools who have the low numbers and even the other ones too, if there's, I understand absences, you know, if a day that the assessment was given and I don't know if you go back and give them again, how do you get 9%? Are the students refusing to take the assessments?
That's a great question, and I don't have information to specifically be able to state what happened with everybody. However, if the teacher does not implement or have the students engage in the process that day or that week, usually the windows are about a week, and sometimes, I think often we've extended them to maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks, then the students in that classroom as a whole would not have taken them. So it does require somebody leading the students to that, to doing it at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day without interfering significantly with instruction.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll kind of go back to how all of this information has informed what we're thinking next. Because there is something that we need to do differently and do about what we're finding. I'll go over some of the staff survey results, and here you can see response rates. Again, hovering right below, the aggregate hovering right below half of our staff and the lowest of all quarters, with these surveys having been implemented or administered, sent out the last couple of weeks of school. A high scorer for our staff was, I feel competent and successful at my work. When we look at improvements, we saw significant improvements in most of our schools. 4 out of the 5 schools showed double-digit growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year on this item. Again, we have varied participation and response rate, with the Q4 not being extremely high, but we see those improvements pretty much across the board, with Coquillard showing a 22% improvement on this item. Other items that we pulled out that had 80% or more: I enjoy my work, I understand and support, or am aligned to our school's organization, mission, and vision. We also saw some areas for improvement, some areas of focus as we look, even with lower response rates, at a few of the items. At my school, we have a culture of accountability among staff across the board, had a decrease, and the current levels of those percentages are also significantly lower. I would send my own child to my school We believe that that's an important indicator and something that we'd like to measure the movement on. We saw improvements, double-digit improvements at one of our schools, at Coolard. At Navarre, we saw some improvement as well, and then we saw some decreases that varied in size in the 3 schools that remain. Those 2 areas, definitely areas of focus as we plan for and coherently look at what we're doing to support teachers and to ensure monitoring of implementation of the practices and what we're putting forth. Our family survey results. I spoke a little about this at the introduction of the survey. Here are our families. The percentages are not provided, as I believe we've communicated before, but I want to make clear. We have families that might have 3 different students in the school, so we don't have the same ability to measure percentages as we do with a total number of staff or a total number of students. There's still a lot of room for improvement in family survey participation, but Q3 did have much higher numbers, as you can see. We're about 1/3 in Q4 of what Q3 was.
And do we think the survey response rate, is that mostly, I mean, are we thinking that's timing related? You mentioned that earlier. But then being across the board, students, staff, and family responses. So, like, is there different suggestions on what we will do in the future to either change date or how we'll get better survey response rates?
Yes, by all means, I think this information is critical in what our next steps are. First of all, our discussions have begun as to what is the intentionality of the cadence of quarterly. Is it something that we need to be measuring that needle each quarter? Is it something that we measure a couple of times a year to see our actions moving the needle and what's being implemented? Is it taking effect? Are the questions organized in a way that is helpful for informing what we do next? Are they helpful to the stakeholders that are taking? Are they understandable to the stakeholders that are taking the assessment but survey? Also, what are the strategies for families to engage? Is it sending out one notification, or do we have a communication plan that really brings it home? Can we leverage it so that it's connected to when, let's say, we have a parent-teacher conference and we have a table or a kiosk where parents can come in, and we saw some of that, but really continuing kind of like the intentional way we can collect as much information as possible, and the rationale behind why we collect it and why it's so important for our families, communicating that to them as we increase that partnership. Does that respond to the question? Overall, the family scores did increase, like was mentioned, since Q1 in almost all items. The only one that was a decrease was a 1 percentage point decrease. My child is excited to go to school, moved from 74% to 73%. 80% of parents did claim that their basic needs are being met. And we'd like to highlight in terms of a school, Warren, as we look at and really see different stories across each school. In terms of the survey data, Warren had an increase in score for all questions on the family survey since Q1, had over 94% agree of the questions. So 94% agreement in the stakeholders that were surveyed. Here we go with the communication item. I get regular updates and communication about school events and updates about what is happening at the school. And these scores did show increases. We saw the highest increases, double digit, 16 percentage points at Navarre. Still room to grow, but specific communication actions had been identified and had been implemented in each of the schools. So we look forward to continuing those, but parents are reporting that they noticed those changes. Again, that was something that the principals were able to share about as they created their action plans and dug into the data and then shared it with other principals, with the data team facilitating those sessions. So in summary, we know that we can't unpack too much with data that doesn't have response rates that potentially represent all of our families, all of our staff, or all of our students. And so we really want to focus on often and when we are getting that information so that it is the most useful and the reliable data that we need to inform decisions. I want to reiterate that each school has its own storyline with the data, ups and downs and what's happening. And so looking both at the increases and decreases serve to inform a school team as to what's happening, as well as looking at what the level is. So great increases are wonderful, but when you're starting at 20%, there's still a lot of room to grow. So how quickly are they moving those percentages of agreement across stakeholders is also important. We've talked about the timing of the survey and also, like I mentioned, is the cadence right? How often do we get the information? Is it serving its purpose, or is it sensitive to incremental change in a way that we can really get traction from it every quarter, or is it something that we need to look at a couple of times a year, potentially? The data action plans, we want to continue with the work that we've gotten feedback from the principals on that allows them to target their improvement, and really aligning this to the bigger school improvement and how we plan actions, monitor actions, and implement to see how things are working is key. The zone's broader strategy, in addition to engaging principals and being able to have them share and communicate their actions and what's been working, is also to have coherence and alignment of the data. The source of how the data originated doesn't necessarily lend itself to a lot of analysis around a framework. And so we're really looking to see, how does this impact certain areas? Family and the investment of our families, the partnership work that we're doing with them. How does it relate to what we're doing in instruction and organizing indicators or items to a framework? Really provides us with a different level of analysis that we haven't necessarily been able to do. Focus groups have been wonderful, and we would like to continue to explore that, but really having a solid framework to connect the items to, I think, is vital. We've talked about the frequency and the timing, and then really focusing on the data that we need to inform decisions, both at the zone level, but sometimes an aggregate of 5 schools doesn't give us a full picture. So what's happening at the individual school level, and how can the data inform decisions by school and school leaders?
I have a comment if I could, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, and I know that, I guess what I would say about Q4 is it is what it is. And you've kind of embedded maybe some of the reasons why overall the numbers there are a lot of areas where numbers went down in not a way that we were looking forward to. And so I guess my comment would be that, indeed, you are right that the school's storylines are something that, I don't know if it's too deep in the weeds for the board, and I think it's important for personnel in each building to be discussing the why did we get the results that we did, and what are we going to do next? Because in the areas where we want to see improvement, it's very concerning, especially when I guess the one that pops out to me the most is with our middle school survey and the students' feeling of safety. And I know we've you all have shared a lot of things we've done in regards to safety, whether it be hiring, security, SROs, peacekeepers, social emotional learning, all the different, clear backpack, all the different things we've done. We've been told about in that would help with feeling secure and safe and not bullied. And it's like, what is the thing that would come from the staff that would tell us otherwise what needs to be done? And so I appreciate kind of your overview, but I think probably what would be more enriching for us is if each building were able to kind of share their story as to what does this data mean for us and what's the next step. It's hard to get at that when you're given to us as a, just in a group of 5, but this is kind of one of those discussions where it would have been helpful for the principals of the team. And I know it's summertime, so what I imagine might happen is these become discussion points for professional development, I imagine, where you all figure out what's the going forwards. So while the numbers, I'm just saying for me anyway, overall are not, we're not in the right direction. It's important to acknowledge that and for feedback to come from the folks in the buildings as to why do we think that was, and what are we gonna do that's gonna be different. And I don't know if that means consistency across all schools, or does that mean we do what's right in our building to get consistent information. You talked about the data collection, when it was collected and all that. I mean, that's for you guys to kind of figure out, but I think as a building, it seems like it's a building level discussion, I guess in conjunction with the admin team and how you all address that. But yeah, it does really depends on the school storyline, like what actually was happening. And I know there was a lot going on, so many changes in leadership and even decisions that the bigger board, the different board has made may have been impacting some of them, kind of how people are feeling in the buildings. So I don't know, that's just my comment. It's a meandering comment, but I think more feedback really will come from the building, folks at the building level.
Thank you. In terms of implementation, there are some things that as a zone we can support, but implementing the surveys is going to happen on the ground. And response rates are really important to be able to unpack this fully. We see in some cases Q3 really showed improvements, right? And then in Q4, those last few days of school, we had minimal results, but we don't, in full transparency, we're going to share them. One of the things that we're doing is school improvement planning. Really requires a needs assessment that's comprehensive and really analyzing the information. We've tried to organize the information for schools and school leaders, including survey items, to be able to dig in and utilize the information as they think about what are the barriers to reaching the goals. And how does that then align to what we're going to do about it? And those strategies can live in a document called the School Improvement Plan. So the comprehensive needs assessment includes that we've put together for schools, for school leaders to digest, includes survey items related to the different areas to help them make those decisions. Because we have low response rates, we don't want to ignore that we have results that are continued areas for improvement. Thank you.
What type of emphasis or what's the word? Importance is being put on the surveys? Like, are they just, okay, we gotta do these surveys, if you do them, you do them, if you don't, you don't, and you get what you get? Or, and I'm talking about specifically the students which are being of computers to take these assessments themselves by the adults that are in the classrooms, but also the adults who work in these classrooms and their surveys themselves, because I'm looking at the parent response and it's extremely low, but that also would go along with parent engagement, which would tell me that there's not a whole lot of parent engagement in these schools, because if I'm engaged in my child's school and I get a survey, I'm gonna fill it out. And so I can kind of see what's going on with that, but for those teachers and students where you're getting these low response levels, what does this survey mean to them, or how is it being put out there to them as far as needing to, this information is needed? And I don't know what can be done to like increase those scores. Maybe there's a random raffle for everybody who does them, and we, you know, pull out names and like, what's there? Is this for the student? I mean, for the teachers, can this be tied to something else? You didn't complete your survey, like performance evaluations, like part of a performance evaluation. I guess I'm just trying to get at how do you improve the response rate, because of what you're trying to see with, like in Navarre, 9% of the students complete. You can't get a picture. And I understand like timing, which I would think would be thought out in advance and say, well, we can't do it the last few days of school because, you know, kids are not here, people leave early for vacation, whatever. So you know, I'm gonna stop talking and I'll give you an answer.
Thank you for the question. I think there are some lessons learned. The window was way too late, and that's something that I will take responsibility for. The last few weeks are when I learn and all of the testing is done. However, it's when things are wrapping up, and not necessarily an ideal time to get a last measure. We go back to the question as well, do we need 4 points of time during the year, or could we do it a little bit differently at times where people aren't ready for a break, whether that be summer or whether that be winter? In terms of what is being done, I would like to be able to answer that clearly in terms of each school and what their plan was. We've been communicating at each survey window every few days to leaders to let them know what the rates are, and kind of have some, I don't want to say healthy competition, but have the leaders take a look at where all of the schools are. There's more to be done, and I think we also go back to teachers, students, and staff or families understanding the purpose, what this data helps us do, and communicating that. So work to be done for sure, and how as a zone can we kind of set up the parameters for that, but then have schools make sure that they're implementing that in their unique ways, raffles or otherwise.
Because that would go back to the accountability question for the staff. We have these surveys that we can do or we don't have to do, so I can see where they will think that there are accountability issues when we don't even have to do a survey that's sent out to us by our employers. So that's, but then the other thing is this a survey that is like, I don't even know how to ask this question, like a company survey? Is this something that you made up? Is this something that somebody else made up? The reason I'm asking that is because when we were looking at, and Rosa asked about if kindergartens were receiving this, like you said, third to fifth grade, which I saw that here, and I look at a particular question that is in quotes, and they're sitting at computers themselves doing this, and it says, I have opportunities to develop skills outside the classroom. Does a third grader know what that means and how to answer that, and able to, one, read some of these words, but two, interpret what that means?
In terms of how these items originated, to be honest, they existed prior, and I think they were developed and designed maybe of the zone. The data team did take a look at some of the items and refined some of the wording. What we think is necessary is that those items be understood so that there's real validity to the content, right? We know that kids understood what it's asking, or that staff understood what it's asking, or parents understood what it's asking. So how we ask questions, I think, needs to be looked at, whether that's something that's generated elsewhere or we've got to look at content validity. And also sometimes looking at questions by asking two different questions allows us to see if there's reliability or consistency across items. And so those pieces are, I think, something important for us to still tie to something bigger, so that the data that comes out of it, the results aren't just items that we're addressing, but it gives us clusters that tell us about social emotional, right, impact, or the supportive environment in a classroom. This tells us about how engaging and challenging schoolwork is in the perception of students. This tells us about what's really affecting staff. We look forward to looking at new items as well as a cadence that can help the responses.
Thank you.
One final comment I have is from Ms. Ball's comments about the pre-hearing. We used to have the principals come to our board meetings, to do reports. And I know it may not be possible every month, but maybe for the quarters, for the principals to come to report on the results that is according to their own schools might be, that way we're connected with them as well, and with face and name, and they could ask us questions or we could ask them questions. It may make it more meaningful than just looking at just data sets.
Thank you. I think, again, those storylines, the actions that are being taken, and the implementation of certain things that are really starting to show results would be great for you to experience directly with the principals.
Any other questions? Any hands up from our online folks? If not, I think we're good. And we will move on to the next section of our agenda here. So we'll round back to the finance report. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I will briefly present our 501c3 finances and an update on all our zone funds. Starting with I have three financials for our 501c3 discretionary fund. To start, we have our statement of activity, or revenue and expenses, for May. As you can see here, the revenue, as a reminder, is from our funds held by the district, by which we seek reimbursement for grant-funded positions. And you will see here our expenditures, primarily payroll. Some of these expenses are then we seek reimbursement for. So that's the ebb and flow of the funds from the zone to the district, primarily relating to payroll. You can see here our expenditures outpaced our revenues, but this is just a function of the reimbursements being requested a little later, or just the processing time for them to get back to us to cover the payroll expenditures. So you see expenditures were higher. We will get those if they'll post next month. One item here you will see, which may not have been presented last month, is the other revenue. We, along with the accountants and from the board feedback, are segregating our interest income. Since this is a higher interest rate environment, our checking account is now earning interest that's more than 18 cents a month, for example. So we're putting it here, and you can see the interest for the month, which the zone chief has indicated we'd like to use a majority of that, if approved by the board, to help the community and the community efforts.
That's the other revenue line.
Yes.
That's added, right?
Other revenue line, yes. All right. Moving on to our other 501c3 financial here, this.
Quick question, going back on that, and I missed the finance committee report. I'm assuming Ryan asked this during the meeting and he's not here, so I'll ask it. The negative revenue under contributions, what caused that? Just whenever you see a negative under
Sure.
revenue.
Sure, sometimes I work with the accountants to close these books and I may find something, I don't have time to have them fix it before our meeting, but basically we created a new line item called contributions to document some of the funds that our donations. So for example, the student services team this year has been very diligent in seeking donations, and some of that is accounted for on the 501c3, but we'll also, if we make we pay a bill on that behalf out of their donations, we take it out of here. So here we paid some things on their behalf, but the funds haven't, all the funds aren't reflected here to balance that out. They're coming in.
Reflected yet?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Yeah, so we do clean up these negative balances like that. The benefits are showing negative. That will be cleaned up. We basically got reimbursed for benefits ahead of us paying the bill to the district. So we pay once monthly, but they reimburse sometimes twice a month. So the reimbursement came back before the benefits payment. So sometimes you'll see a negative benefits. Okay. Moving on to the statement of financial position. Here, this shows our assets and liabilities. Again, our assets are primarily all our bank account and our accounts receivable. The bank account is just the funds from the reimbursements from our grants. Same for accounts receivable, are those funds we're expecting reimbursements for our grants that are held by the district. Our liabilities are the same. Our liabilities are all to the district, and that's in the form of benefits, mostly benefits that we pay. We make a benefits payment. All right. Moving on to the last discretionary fund financial is our budget to actual. We look at this to track our spend for our 501c3. Our year end is June 30, and as we approach, you can see the very last number on this page is that we're at 88% of our budget. So we are on track to remain under budget or right at budget for our 501c3 discretionary fund. We will use this budget, take a look back and refine our 23-24 zone discretionary budget. For example, we may add a few accounts, we may delete a few accounts, because you can see some things we're not budgeted for, like maybe office supplies. You see there's no budget column, but we could add that. So you see some things were anticipated, some weren't, but we still remain within budget. Again, some things went over budget and some under, but overall still within budget. Next coming up for our 501c3 would be after we officially close out June and we report that out to you in July. We're looking to start our audit as soon for the 22-23 financials as soon as the end of July. So that's what's next for the zone funds. If there are no questions, we'll move to the final financial for this evening. Would be our all funds update. This includes our discretionary funds as encapsulated by the education fund at the very top. So our discretionary fund is peeled off of that education fund just for broader reference. So here's all our funds that fund the zone. You could see what we expected, our 22-23 budget, what our actual revenue was, and our actual expenditures and any leftover. Just as a quick reminder, the zone receives a pro rata share of all these funds based on our ADM. Okay, as we're winding down the year, we're spending funds and conscious of their expiration. So for example, title funds we have to spend by September, and we work closely with the district. They remind us as well, hey, you still have some title funds, make sure you spend that, etc. So we're looking at making sure we take care of that. Also, as a reminder, some of the grants like ESSER you see here in SIG, if we don't spend it, it does roll over. We won't. Also, just want to highlight two other things. Our ESSER 3, we have more than we was originally budgeted. This was a effort of some of our cost-cutting measures this year, decreases in expenses, so we were able to preserve our ESSER funds for another year. So this is helping us stave off that budget cliff for another year and transition to life post-ESSER. And that's pretty much it. If there's no questions, that is the zoned financial update.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Can you remind me what TSL stands for?
I can tell you what it's for because the acronyms aren't coming to me right now, but it's basically for teachers' stipends in terms of professional development and things of that nature. It can also pay for a department head, which it has department head stipend, hiring teacher leader stipends, things of that nature, things to promote teacher opportunities and growth. That does have to be spent down by September as well. So we're working with that grant manager to make that happen.
And I missed the finance committee meeting, and I know Ryan isn't here tonight. Were there any questions, things that he brought up during that we would report out here?
No questions there. He said he'd let us know if there was anything as he did a deeper dive, but there was nothing on our meeting.
I had made a comment about the interest rate, and you said that you were checking into it, and you did, and I just want to say thank you for doing that. I think that is, especially given that Dr. Lewis said that that interest, the community help the students, help the parents, going from, and this I know it can't be not with, well, I don't know what's in the checking accounts, but this amount was going from 18-cent interest that we were showing, which probably wasn't a whole lot more than that with the regular accounts that they ran or savings accounts, and going to these, with the way interest rates have changed and have increased, that other revenue money or those interest dollars will increase and will be able to help more students and families.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? All right, seeing none, I will, it's normally recommended that we approve the financial reports. And so I'll entertain a motion if people are prepared to take action on our May financial report.
So,
All right, so there's a motion to approve the May financial report. Second?
Second, Watkins.
Second, thank you very much. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll move to a vote. All in favor say aye.
aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? All right, so seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you. All right, so next up on our agenda is zone chief report. Yeah, we are. So zone chief report. Take it away.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the public who are with us in person, virtually, and staff. Very quickly, in terms of recognitions, I want to start off by acknowledging Mrs. Melanie Hackett, who is most recently served as our Director of Diverse Learners, who really helped us to clean up special education and get us in compliance, and worked very closely with the district. The district actually tried to poach her from us, but we said no. But then also really good feedback, in particular from the trustees. One in particular, Mrs. McCullough, who really encouraged us to think through efforts to increase the number of certified teachers in the zone. And so we've asked Mrs. Hackett to serve in this new role moving forward as Executive Director of Talent Development. So she will be creating a new teacher induction program that provides year-long mentorship for new teachers. She will also be tracking teacher certification and helping to find teachers get back in programs to move from emergency permit towards full certification. She's working on partnerships with universities for us to be able to host student teachers, and working on a grow your own pipeline where we cultivate our own teachers from within. So she's doing a number of things to help us increase the number of certified teachers. Some of that she will be able to leverage bits and pieces that are already happening in the district, but to really focus really isn't anyone who is tracking consistently certification status and making sure that folks aren't falling behind. So congratulations to Mrs. Hackett. She has already hit the ground running in that capacity, and looking forward to the work that she will do there. Next, of course, June is Pride Month, and so we want to wish a happy Pride to all of the zone staff, students, and families who make up a part of the LGBTQ plus community as we recognize and celebrate Pride. And then also we want to recognize National Immigration Heritage Month. As a nation of immigrants, it is important that we recognize and celebrate all of the folks who come to this country from various shores abroad to help make up the fabric of this great diverse country and state. Moving to the next item, personnel. Starting with the new hires. So on the zone side, we've not onboarded anyone. Through the district side, we've onboarded one new person as a kindergarten teacher at Wilson Elementary. And then we move to the next slide, separations. We have a total of 3 separations, actually 4 on the zone side that you see here. All are school-based roles, and then on the district side, there are a total of 3 separations. Again, all school-based roles. And that is it for me, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, so the last item on our agenda is board communications, and I think we are going to send something out about our potential July 11th. Our next July 11th meeting, and we're going to end up hosting that or not, and we will of course do public notice related to that. And then I just want to thank all the board members for the last month emails and follow-ups for meetings we've had as we work with SBCSC on the future of the South Bend Empowerment Zone. And then actually, usually I'm supposed to do public comment before this. I skipped over that. So we're actually going to move to our general, and it's on my list here. On our list, and I hit that already. So, all right. So we actually, I'll interrupt in the middle of my board communications portion there and do our general public comment part. And so I'll read the policy again as we have our general public comment now. So at regular meetings, the board will hold public comment. I don't need to read the whole thing, right? I probably do, right? I do, right? Man, every time. Can I just record myself doing this and I can just read it in every time? At regular meetings, the board will hold a public comment period before each vote, except for the consent agenda. It is requested that the public focus comments on the topic of the vote. The board will also hold a public comment portion on all other topics at the end of the meeting. Individuals must sign up online by 12 p.m. of the meeting date or in person no later than 10 minutes after the call to order. Individuals must make their comments in person at the board meeting. Individuals are invited to address the board for 3 minutes. Individuals may comment in the order of sign up per topic. Individuals may only speak once during a public comment period. Speakers shall properly identify themselves after they approach the podium by stating their name and address for the record. Personnel issues are not to be addressed during open sessions. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a person's the statement becomes personally directed, abusive, or obscene. Are there any public comments at this time? Seeing none, we will move on then back to board communications portion. So I shared upcoming dates. Thank board members. I think that's all I had, unless board members had anything that they wanted to share at this time. Looking at our online folks, if anybody had anything to share. Seeing none, then we are adjourning today's meeting of the South Bend Empowerment Zone at 7:21 p.m. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, everybody online, and have a good evening.